Gems. Welcome back to the A Gem Forever podcast. I'm your host, Andrea, and I'm back this week to discuss a very pertinent and pressing issue that is currently plaguing the entire Black community in this nation. This issue is racism. Today, I am joined by two special guests, and we are going to have a dialogue about racism and its current impact on Black Americans. If you tuned into the last episode, my sister Shanelle Clay joined me, and we dialogued about mental health in the Black community. Chanel is back this week along with her colleague, Marcus Mason, to give us a Black male perspective on this conversation. I'll let them introduce themselves before we dive in. So, Chanel, go ahead and take it away and let the people again know who you are in all your glory.
Okay. I'm Shanelle Clay. I'm a licensed professional counselor in DC and Pennsylvania, as well as a nationally certified counselor. I am currently the assistant clinical director for Onyx Therapy Group, located in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Chanel. Marcus, go ahead, brother.
So my name is Marcus Mason. First of all, I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the invite and the collaboration. I am a psychotherapist in the state of Maryland, a licensed graduate professional counselor. I'm also the founder and chief therapist of Minds in Motion Therapeutic Services.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. So basically, I have two very well-known and renowned mental health professionals within the Black community who are going to dialogue with me today about this topic. So the past few weeks for the Black community in general have been essentially heavy. We've been dealing with the consistent revealed murders of Black Americans at the hands of police officers and white supremacists. About 2 weeks ago, the senseless murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor were brought to light. And a week ago, Christian Cooper, just by innocently bird watching in the park, could have lost his life because Amy Cooper felt threatened. And within the same week, George Floyd was murdered maliciously by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. And I felt like his death triggered something within our community, evoking a range of emotions and a serious call to action on our behalf. So my first question to the both of you, in your professional opinion, what do you feel about the murder of George Floyd triggered the emotions of Black Americans and the subsequent events that followed, such as the protests, rebellions in different cities, the burning of the Minneapolis Police Department, and how do you feel about the ways in which we have responded?
So first and foremost, the topic of conversation is just a very delicate conversation, right? And it applies to Black folks, but it doesn't just apply to Black folks. Let me just throw that out there. I think that there's a misconception about how this death of this man, this human being, this life, right, that we watched through video doesn't impact others, but it sets the tone, right, of what is accepted and what is not accepted. I think that there has been a response from people that has been illustrated in so many different formats because people are tired, right? Like people are tired. I think that we have half of us who are numb, right? Which is that we've seen this before, we've heard of it before, and we're so emotionally tired and emotionally drained that we feel helpless, right? But then also on the flip side, there are people who are tired and their response is a little bit more critical, which includes, the rioting, the protesting, etc., which I don't think that some people have gotten used to people's responses to grief, because that's exactly what this is. And so a lot of this is just a response to grief or event grief. Event grief is kind of like the terminology, not a clinical one, but the terminology that is used when a person mourns or goes through the grievance process for a very critical event. So for example, Kobe Bryant's death stirred up event grief. The deaths that continuously keep happening stir up event grief. So you don't have to have a direct contact to the person who is deceased, but you have emotional contact or emotional response to the actual event. So that's what's going on right now. Marcus, you have something?
Thank you,
So
Shanelle. Oh, hold on, Marcus. Shanelle, can you hear me? I just want to make sure because I got your text. So I
Yeah,
moved.
in the beginning
Okay.
it was real muffled. So
Okay, got you. I just moved. So Marcus, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna add on. I think that it's very interesting to say, to like kind of like piggybacking off of event grief. You know, a lot of times when things of this kind of nature happen, we tend to, as human beings, like put ourselves into that, into those scenarios and into those environments. So, you know, professionally, I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, like they're kind of like, well, now what if that's me, or what if that's, you know, how do I handle it, or what am I supposed to do? And then it kind of creates this higher level of alertness that is not it's not good. And it's like, it's very, I won't say it's a negative outlook, but it's a very unrealistic outlook and an unrealistic expectation that kind of like any interaction you are in is going to be a really, really bad one. So like we're already like seeing things in a certain light. And it's kind of like when you put that alertness into it, now every time I see somebody, or every time I think of somebody that doesn't want me or doesn't like me or wants to, you know, hurt me, then I begin to picture myself in that environment. So it's kind of like operating almost in the yellow or red for your life. And that's not conducive to anybody's well-being or progression in life. You know, it's one thing to say I'm stressed and I'm be able to work through it, but this isn't that kind of stress, right? This isn't a positive stress or workplace stress or just kind of a personal stress. This is you know, your well-being. You know, even if we were to talk about like kind of how Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like you have to feel safe in order to get anywhere or to be anything or to be able to be any kind of productive. And nobody feels safe. I won't say it's just Black people or other people, but nobody feels safe right now where we are. So with that being said, we have to now begin to acknowledge the grief, one, and not kind of like belabor it or not push it away or not just get over it. And then we also have to be able to process that grief, which I think is a big thing that the Black community isn't used to.
Thank you both for that. I agree wholeheartedly with both of your statements. I think for me personally, the death of George Floyd was just such a trigger because once I found out he was a truck driver, it kind of just took my emotions to another level because it made me think about my brother who's a truck driver or who drives from state to state, and that very easily could have been him. And in my mind, you know, switching out George Floyd's body and putting my brother's there, that very well could have been my best friend. My brother's one of my best friends. That very well could have been my best friend lying helplessly on the ground, saying that he couldn't breathe, calling out for our mother. And this officer just isn't letting up. So it just emotionally, it triggered me a lot. And I just felt helpless at the time. And I just was unsure, you know, of what to do with all of my emotions. I went from being very sad, being very upset, and it just kind of escalated and increased. I was very enraged and angry. And I didn't know what to do with all of that. And if anybody felt the way that I felt, I can truly understand why everything is going on in the manner in which it's going on right now in regards to the riots, in regards to people, you know, peacefully protesting. I understand it all because I feel like for years we have just been going through the same cycle and saying the same things and trying to get justice for us, and nothing has happened. And so I feel like people feel for so long our voices haven't been heard. So if you can hear us this way, you know, this is what we're going to do. And it has happened at a time where people really don't have anything to lose. What is it, 40 million people are currently unemployed. No one's thinking about their job right now. No one's thinking about, oh, I can lose this if this happens. Everybody's just thinking about, we want justice for this man. We want justice for our community. And so that's how I feel in regards to just the situation in general. So I'll move on to the next question and Marcus, this one speaks directly to you, and then Shanelle, if you have anything to add afterwards, feel free to piggyback. But I was looking up just some statistics as I was doing my research because I wanted to be, well informed going into this conversation. And I saw that a study conducted at Rutgers found that Black people are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. And then I found an article written in the Washington Post that stated that in the US, unarmed Black men are 5 times more likely than unarmed white men to be killed by the police. So Marcus, speaking from the perspective of a Black male, why do you feel as though Black men are targeted and often seen as threats?
That's a good question. I would say I think that it's a less of No, I'm just gonna keep it a stack. So I think that Black men are targeted because people are afraid of the power that we have. I also think that they are afraid with the strength and the, kind of like the edge, the weight, the intensity that we carry when it comes to, even just walking down the street or just walking into a room. And it can be kind of intimidating, right? And I think that the only way people think they can handle it is by, if it's a wall, either you go around the wall, you go through the wall. And they have power, so they go through the wall. We're the wall. I know there's been times where, like, even with me, like, I didn't realize my stature carried a certain weight until someone like pulled me to the side, and I wasn't loud or boisterous when I walked into the room. It was just, you present in a way that comes off very intense. And that intensity can be mistaken, if it's not understood, for aggression. Or that intensity can be mistaken for, and if it's around the wrong people, for intimidation. And, I think it takes young men, older men, and Black men and white men, honestly, to be able to have that kind of tough conversation, to get past what and why the targeting is occurring. Again, on top of the fact that, I've never been in law enforcement, but I do know a lot of law enforcement officers, and the kind of thought process that law enforcement usually has is one that, if you see a 13-year-old white boy, you're not gonna treat them like a grown white man. But if you see a 13-year-old Black boy, you'll definitely treat them like a Black man. But it's because of how we've been, the picture that they got, or the what they received, the information that they learned when they were growing up, the quote unquote, the what can I say, like, when there's these times where people are saying stuff like, that's just Black people, or that's just a Black man, or everybody's a quote unquote hoodlum, or that's just how you have to carry with them because that's the only thing they understand. When they hear that growing up constantly over and over, and then when you get into the workplace and it's the same thing, and again, they have the power. So they're being proactive, and it's in a negative way. So I think that that's a main reason why we're targeted so much. On top of the fact that there are stereotypes that we don't live up to. There are assumptions and presumptions that people have before they even meet a Black male, or a Black woman for that nature. I think it's interesting just how people, or always times, no, they're just voicing their opinion. It's a little different. You just have to be able to, acknowledge that this is how they voice their opinion. It doesn't have to be angry or upset or mad. So I think that there are stereotypes that we have to break, and there are barriers that we have to get past. But it's going to take more than just Black men to get past that barrier at this point. It's been ingrained for 400 plus years, and the study, it sounds like, is just bringing more light and more empirical evidence to what has already been occurring forever.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, so I heard a couple of things in the midst of it. So, Andre, you brought forth a test, and so those statistics are so valid, right? Which is that Black men or Black people are way more prone to be injured, hurt, or killed by the police. Even going further, they're more susceptible to be arrested or to be charged with nonviolent offenses, right? And so we historically, right, like if we want to go all the way back, if we want to go back, right, even in the interruption of our normalcy when we were in Africa, we were invaded, right? Our space was taken, and they were even fearful about leaving their own boats, right? I'm saying they, as in Europeans, were fearful about leaving their own boats, and so they tried their best to kind of, manipulate the system off of weapons, etc. Right? So there was always a fear established, right? Because you fear what you don't know. That's one of my favorite quotes by Wale, which is "Fear what you don't know." It's the truth. I think half of it is ignorance. I think some of it has to do with seeing what power actually looks like, because when Black people congregate and when we get together, we are so strong, right? And we're so powerful. And so historically, people have been trying to separate and to break up that lineage of power. And so we've watched the progression of Black men be stripped or be interrogated for the potential power that they had. You know, we talk a lot about rape of women, but there were men who were also being assaulted, right, by slave owners' wives. You know, even historically in content, right, they were being separated from their families because they knew that they could support them and be more of a father, you know, to the kids, and raise them and groom them to be even more powerful people. So it was a psychological response, which is, how are we going to make sure that they stay suppressed? Well, let's figure it out, right? And that psychological residual of slavery, which I think I talked about in the last podcast, which Dr. Joy DeGruy, there's a post-traumatic response to all of that, right? And so historically, we now lead up to all of these years, which is, if you're a slave, you are way less harmful for me, right? Because I can always put you back in line. And then we release the slaves, but we still use emotional type of like strength when we like, okay, well, I won't give you everything when I release you as a slave. I'll keep your 40 acres and a mule. You may get it, you may not get it, who knows, right? But I'm going to make sure that I release you with little to nothing, right? So then you'll have to come back to me because I have the power. You have to come back to me for your resources. And then we move further along the pipeline of history, which is, okay, well, now we've conquered that, but I'm still going to keep education from you. I'm still going to keep voting rights from you. I'm still going to keep, people are running out of options of things that they can keep. They're running out of options of things that they can weaponize. And so by force, by reintroduction to trauma, right, is a way of making sure that you keep your people suppressed. So for Black men has always been the target. There's always been something about a Black man's stature. Now, as a Black woman, when a Black man enters a room, there's an automatic gravitation towards my eyes and their face, because I feel like that's what they that level of respect and that level of command is what they naturally get from me. But I'm not the only other person who does it, right? Like, I have a classmate who's very smart, very intelligent, and when he shows up, I'm not the only person who automatically looks at him. My white counterparts do too, because he demands power even before he opens up his mouth. So when we see power, either we gravitate towards power or we become fearful of power. So in hindsight, Black men have always been the target. They have always been someone to be feared because we don't know what they're capable of. We don't know the level of strength that they have, because they have always been resilient, even in the midst of their power being stripped from them. That's something that you should fear, right? Anything that will multiply and create strength and overcome and be in a conquering position, yeah, you should definitely be fearful of that. Why not?
I wonder, Chanel, if it's something from a place of like that fear is definitely there, but I also wonder if it's a fear because of people knowing that it will be like the roles will kind of be changed if, you know, if we were on equal playing fields. I'm gonna just say it because I love Black and Black is beautiful. If we're on equal playing fields, I don't think we're even. We're not equal. If we have this, if we start on the same baseline, we're gonna be higher. But I think that's because of the way that we carry ourselves, and I think that that's something that I don't want to say white people or Caucasian. No, I do want to say that. I think Caucasian people know, but so I think these things are put into place so that way, again, that never happens. Like that, what you were talking about, that buck breaking, you know, getting the biggest slave and then abusing them and making them do things that, you know, they don't want to do against their sexuality or against their gender or against their race or their religion or their culture. And then tying it back into, you know, then a white woman gets to tell them what they can and can't do for pleasure and how they pleasure them. All of that, I think, was very systemic and systematic on how they broke down the psyche of a Black man to kind of reduce us to not knowing or not remembering like the power that we actually have.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. I think there's a level of like I said, just like fearing what you don't know, recognizing that there's a potential for equality that could arise, right? And making sure that there is never, well, I'm not gonna say there's never, but there will be a hard fight in order for equality to be granted or provided to you, right? Because, you know, we have to fight for things, and we've had to historically fight for things that should have been warranted to us in the first place, especially education. And so there comes a time where people, you know, this new generation, I keep telling people, our millennials and our Generation Z are not similar to our ancestors, right? And that's not to say a negative thing. What that means is that some of the rights were already established, some of the context was already there, some of the miseducation that carried on for generations has depleted itself. So that's what I mean by they're not our ancestors, because our ancestors were 10 times stronger than we were. Can you imagine being in slavery for over 400 years? Absolutely not, right? I don't think half of us couldn't even last an hour when they told us that we were going to be in quarantine. So I know that we're not our ancestors. We don't have that level of strength and resilience, right? But we have a new form of branding, a new birth of mindset, right? That recognizes that, yes, we were brought over here on boats, but we left land, right? We left sacred places. We left our religious practices. We left a whole lot of our identity, right? And picked up a new form of identity through acculturation by force, right? And even so, we have made that level of culture our own, even in a sense where, yes, we had we couldn't communicate, you know, or we weren't allowed to speak our native tongue. Cool, let's go pick up a drum and then teach everybody else the language of what the beat stands for. Cool, absolutely, right? We have always been innovative. We have always been smart, even without knowing the native tongue, even without not knowing how to read what was in front of us. And that is scary. I understand that that's scary. I understand that that serves as a weapon to people, right? That somebody who you've stripped many things from can still rise. That is very, very scary. You know, if we think about fire, right? Even if I put a fire out, there's another fire that comes, or if I put that fire out, I can still get sick off of carbon. I can still get sick off of the chemicals, right? Fire doesn't just die instantly. If I blow out a candle, it just doesn't die instantaneously. And that's kind of like how Black people are. They are fire. And we realistically, even if you blow us out, we don't just fizzle right then and there. And so they may have blown out Mr. Floyd when they need him in the neck, but they didn't blow him completely out, because now you have his descendants, his ancestors, his people in the streets protesting about his death.
So now you better come on. I was shouting a little bit in the back. And the computer was like, Andrea, you're still on mute. Listen, you better come through with the fire analogy, Shanelle. That was good. Thank both of y'all for that. Like, I was just like, yes, the fire analogy was everything. This is just like you may have put it out, but like literally, if I just breathe some air back on it, it's going to come back up just like that. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That was good. That was good. I was listening to y'all talk. Y'all kept saying, which actually y'all kind of segued into the next question, talking about systemic racism. Because most of the time, I feel like when people think of racism, they just think of overt racism. It's open, it's out there. I'm walking down the street, you're looking at me funny. You may call me a nigger, or you may make me, I can just openly tell and see that you're being racist towards me. And it's unconcealed and it's observable. But we forget about systemic racism, which is basically racism that has been concealed through systems like education, healthcare, the justice system. You know, a lot of what we're seeing take place right now. And so when I was on Instagram this week, President Obama shared a post from an email that he had received from a Black business owner. And in my mind, it perfectly described what systemic racism is. So I wanted to share it. And I'm going to ask you guys a question. And so the email stated, he said, dude, I got to tell you, the George Floyd incident in Minnesota hurt. I cried when I saw that video. It broke me down. The knee on the neck is the metaphor for how the system so cavalierly holds Black folks down. ignoring the cries for help. People don't care. Truly tragic. So it just, to me, it just, that was basically in my mind, this is a real definition of what systemic racism is. So can you guys just kind of describe in more detail for us the role systemic racism plays, kind of just in preventing progress in America, for Black Americans, for people in general, and how you believe it kind of keeps us in cycles?
Chanel, you want to go first? You want me to go first? You like to finish strong, so I'll go first.
I was about to say, Marcus, go ahead, take it away, go first, because I know you're going to kill it.
So I think that I use for these kind of questions, I use myself, right? And I think about, where I came from, and then kind of how I grew up, and just looking back and realizing, again, just off of a living and like just living in general, we don't have the same education that white people have. I'm just gonna say it. We don't have the same resources, even if we do have the same education, the same, I wasn't going to no tutoring sessions after school. My mom wasn't, she didn't have money to pay for that. I wasn't learning how to take tests better. I wasn't being, we lived in a food desert for a little while, and the closest thing there was a carryout, and that's all there was. There was no fresh fruit. There was no fresh vegetables that you could get. And looking back on that now, like, I understand. People always say, oh, well, you need to do better, you need to eat better, you need to have a better lifestyle. But when you're in poverty, or when you have these things stricken from you, you don't have the chance to even consider that thought process. Like, I know, like, even the kids that I work with today, and in these days, they don't, if I tell them to go to the store and get fruit, they're gonna say, well, Mason, I gotta go like 5 miles to go get some fruit, bro. I'm not doing that. I'm gonna go to the 7-Eleven real quick, and I'm gonna just get some carryout. So, like, looking at how, like, those two pieces, like, really impact, how you feel and how your brain operates. And then what you put in your body is really, it really matters, especially when you're learning and you're growing and you're developing. So it's like our brains are stagnant. We get to a point and we just kind of like sit with our brains, and that's kind of like where we are. And that's where a lot of people are population wise, because, and it's not at fault to them, but it's at fault to the system, because the system knows that it's purposely doing this. Even financial literacy, I was never taught. I still, to this day, and well, now I do, but previously, like, I'll say until college, I was never taught how to really manage my finances. I was never taught what the difference between that sub loan and the direct loan was. It was just, you need to take as much money as you need to go to college. I was never taught that I didn't have to only go to college. There was no family wealth that we had. There was no, my mom didn't have this trust fund that she could just drop on me at 21, and then I could just, have fun with my life and then get my life together when I turned 26, 27. So, like, looking at how all these different things have purposely been input. And again, it's not coincidence. It's not, oh, it just happened to be like that. Like, these things are systematic. And when you do all these things together, that's when you get a population that is unable to really hone in on the greatness that they have and we have, and be progressive, because we've never gotten to a point where we know what that looks like. We've never seen that point of what that looks like. Even on a familial standpoint, everybody loves to say, oh, dads in the Black community don't care, or moms in the white community, moms in the Black community are just, they're too busy trying to work and provide. And in reality, that's the system. That's not the family. It was created to intentionally pour down and break apart Black families, because when you can break apart Black families, then you will break apart the group. And when you can break apart the group, it will be crabs in the barrel. And that's consistently where we've been for at least 80 years, since child support and like the court system was kind of put in place. Like, there's no secret to that. In order to keep a group of people away, or to keep them under, and to keep, again, that knee on the neck, you have to put in things like systemic custody, systemic child support, systemic Let me take all the black fathers out of, let's give them all the drugs, have them sell it for a little while. Then we're going to change the rhetoric around so that way we can arrest them. And then when we arrest them, now all of a sudden we put this into the media, and we talk about how black men don't care about their sons, their daughters. Black men don't care about this. Black women are, doing the most, and they're just always angry. But these are all things that the media has portrayed and that we've accepted because it's the media we're given. And then, like, in reality, like where I'm at the age now and I'm looking back on them, like, there's a lot of little things that you don't realize how like conditioned we are, even when it comes to like buying J's. Like for me, like I tell people all the time, I will never buy a Jordan in my life. That's just who I am. I will never buy a Jordan in my life. I got a lot of Nikes, I ain't gonna lie to you, but I will never buy a Jordan. And it's not because I hate Jordan, but it's because of the fact that we have put shoes above wealth. We've put clothes above wealth. And I get it. Again, that could be, that's a whole nother talk, because I think that's because of what we feel like we have to present like. But financially, if you were to teach that kid how to take that $100 that they're paying on some Nikes and put that into an investment and you teach them that between 15 and 17, I promise you that kid will be that wealthy kid, or wealthy students or wealthy children, and then be even wealthier when they go to college, if they decide to go to college again. Or entrepreneurship. Like I didn't even think about I never considered starting up my own business ever. That was never a thought in my mind. That thought came into my mind after my master's program. And that was the first time. But it was because it was conditioned that entrepreneurship was for people that are lazy, or they just want to create something. They just want to go through life and, be in and out and hop in and out of certain things and not have any real drive. But in reality, if you teach entrepreneurship in the Black community while the kids are in high school, by the time they get to 20, 23, 24, all the businesses should be shooting up. And then maybe, lo and behold, we could have a new Black Wall Street. There's so many different things that they've done to purposely put in barriers, again, for the Black community that just hone in on all of our weak points. But they're only our weak points because it's what they've conditioned us to.
Let's see. Those was good, especially the Black Wall Street comment. Let's see what I have to add.
I'm trying to learn from you, sis.
No. Let's see. Okay. So imagine having two kids in your second grade class, and both of the kids, same age. One of them takes a metro to school and a bus. The other one gets a car ride. Both of their parents live in the exact same, work at the exact same place, and they have the exact same job. But the white dad makes significantly $10,000 more than the Black dad. Let's start there, okay? So that white dad has $10,000 more allocated towards his household, right? Which means that $10,000 could shift where he lives at, could shift vehicle, could shift, if that kid is getting after school services adequately, could shift a lot, because it can have an impact on his education, right? And so now you have two kids with almost the same kind of like background, but then it switches because of financial bearings. Because of the financial bearings, just with the change of the dad being white and making more, and the African American or the Black descendant dad making less, he may not have time to expose his child to other stuff. Maybe that dad then picks up a secondary job so he can get that $10,000 that his coworker has, and he doesn't have enough time to stay with his child. And maybe that child starts to get the notion that maybe the working class is just what it is, and maybe that child feels like his needs are not met, and then it becomes the cycle. See, systemic oppression, systemic racism, however you want to counter it or charter it, does not just start with, well, everybody is racist or this person is racist and so be it. No, there are so many different levels to it, right? As someone who worked in the school system for a while, I witnessed it, right? Especially in a public charter school. witnessing it hands down. These kids live almost maybe less than a mile away from each other. And as soon as you hit North Capitol and you start to see a shift, you like, wait a minute, are we on the same area? You hit New York Avenue, you riding all the way up, you starting to see all these pretty houses, but you start driving further back towards the Maryland line and you starting to see a whole lot of hotels with McKinney-Vento students in them. Same school, same education, different environmental statistics. And if you want to go, let's lead back into slavery. Remember the comment that I mentioned about how the Black man was sometimes often sold off to other places to breed, because that was the terminology that they used, which was breed, right? Because if you had a big Mandingo man who could breed with other Black women at the plantation, then they would foster more Mandingo kids, right? So it was a breeding complex. So now you have the ideology that Black men now, some of them, not all of them, because I hate to do the overgeneralization, sometimes feel like, man, I don't have no stable foundation myself, or no guidance or direction as to how to be a father. So now these same men have translated and transferred all of their knowledge of being absentee dads over to this new generation. So their great grandfather was sold off to another plantation and had 5 extra kids, and then sold off to another one in Virginia with 3 extra kids, and then another one with 2. And now you got a total of 14 kids with no dad. 14 kids with no father to teach them some of the complexity of being a Black man and what does that look like. And then those men then foster a whole nother ideology as to how they can direct themselves as Black men. And then you get to the 1920s and the 1930s and the 1940s, and now people are starting to shift their brains. Maybe I should be around my kids more because we got. Okay, cool. And then guess what happens? Knock, knock, knock. The service. So come on and recruit yourself, so that you can particularly have a stable foundation, because financial well-being was part of it. So that's when they start their recruiting. And then you get to the 1980s, and then you have the crack epidemic, right? And then that started to be a thing. So we have a lineage of systemic barriers, right, that have come from years and years before the 3 of us were created. And so now we are now up to the point where it's like, well, what do we do to try to shift it, right? What can we do to try to shift it? There are people, who are getting well. They're getting mental health assistance. They are focusing on the reestablishment of the Black culture and what does it look like internally, right, to focus on the ideals that maybe our ancestors loved and cherished back when they were still free, right? We're starting to bring that into the forefront. We got a lot of researchers, a lot of generational researchers that are not content with things being the way that they are, and that's what's trying to shift and alter the cycle of the systemic racism. However, we have so many people who are up top who are silent, because silence equals violence. And I'm not talking about the physical kind. I'm talking about the emotional kind. I'm talking about the spiritual kind. I'm talking about the kind that if you don't say something, people automatically think it is okay. So then they start to chart it down to your big wigs that are in the office, that are in corporate, that are even sitting next to you in your cubicle, because my boss ain't say nothing about it. Think about how many times someone countered or said something about the climate or what's going on right now, whether they use Floyd's name as a starter package for the conversation or if they just left it out. Imagine how many conversations were left out of on Monday morning as of today, and was not had, and you have Black folks who are nervous about bringing up the conversation because systemically they know if they say something, then it could shift their promotion. It could shift them being labeled as a troublemaker, an angry Black woman, an aggressive Black man, as Marcus stated earlier. It can shift it. So then they become silent too. And guess what happens? Silence still equals violence. So systemic racism, oppression is well beyond the streets that are being tampered with. Is well beyond riding. It's well beyond this death. It goes way further than that.
Can I say something real quick, Andre?
Go ahead. I was about to say I couldn't have said it better myself. I wanted to see if you wanted to have anything else to add before I moved on to the next question. Thank both of y'all. Go ahead, Marcus.
So I was gonna say that I think it's, Shanelle, you brought up that point, about Black fathers. It's so, like, I hope people are like really internalizing, that, and hearing what that means. Like, it's very hard, like, to work with someone or to see. How can I say this? It's hard to see and to know what you think is right, and then to have that challenged, especially like from a Black male perspective, is so hard. But also, know, like me, I didn't grow up with my father. Like, he was in prison, but I think it's like that change agent that you have to use. So for me, like, when I had a kid, I said, all right, cool. Like, no matter what, like, I remember in high school, me and my brother, like, we literally said it, like, this is word for word. No matter what happens, if we have a kid, we're going to be in that life, because neither of our fathers are in our lives. And we were like, we don't like that. We don't want it. We see how it like makes us feel. So we're never going to do that to our kids. And we made a pact to hold each other accountable to that, which we actually held each other accountable to. But, to see and to know that and to be able to acknowledge that are two different things. And I think that once Black men kind of take that barrier down, and this is a shout out to Black men, but also a push and a challenge. Once Black men take that barrier down and accept that we don't know everything, and that we can learn, and that we can progress, and that we can further educate ourselves on how to educate others, especially our children, I think that's when we'll begin to see, the two-parent household, if that's what we're looking for. That's when we'll begin to see the increase in financial literacy. That's when we'll begin to see the decrease in systematic oppression and racism, because, like, to be honest, there are gonna be people that are gonna have to take the L in this situation. But the overall thinking will be elevated to an extent where we'll always have everybody's back. And then that community will be able to support, rather than maybe one or two people on the block.
Thank you, Marcus. Shanelle, did you have anything else you wanted to add before I moved on to the next question?
No, ma'am.
All right. Marcus made me think about one of the questions I was going to ask. I'm going to hold my thought until I ask this next question, because I did want us to kind of share our experiences with racism, just so people can get an idea that it is something that's still very current in our society, and something that we actually do experience as Black people. So I'll share an experience that I had. This was a few years ago, and it was with a police officer. I was in college, and at the time I had a gold 2000 Monte Carlo. I used to love that car so much. But it was gold. It had tinted windows, and I had gone out somewhere, and I was coming back home. I went to the University of Maryland, so I was on 193 coming back home. I don't remember from where, but I remember that I was stopped, and I drive this road all the time. I had driven this road all the time. Same time of night, never had been stopped for anything. I wasn't speeding, so I didn't know why I had gotten pulled over. So I pull over, two cops proceed to get out of their car. One's on my passenger side, one's on my driver's side. And I had never had an experience where two police officers had come out at once, for a traffic stop. So I'm trying to figure out what's happening. So of course they come, do the typical, put their hands on the car, so the fingerprints are there just in case anything happens to them. Situation, and he comes up to me, and so the cop on the driver's side doesn't have me roll down my window, the one on the passenger side. And so I roll my window down, and so he looks in the car and sees this young Black girl, and he just busts out laughing. And so immediately in my mind, they assumed that I was somebody else. I don't know who they thought was going to be in the car when I rolled my windows down, but the fact that it was just me, some innocent little Black college girl going back to campus, completely shifted the tone of the traffic stop. And so I looked at him and I was like, why are you laughing? Were you expecting somebody else to be in here? And then he just walked back to his squad car, and then the police officer that was on my side asked for my license and registration. I asked why I had gotten stopped. And he told me my tag light was out. Granted, I had driven this road 1,005,000 times. Was my tag light actually even out? It could have been. But I know that wasn't the reason why I had gotten stopped. I had gotten stopped because they see this gold Monte Carlo with black tinted windows. I looked suspicious, and so they want to pull over and see what's going on in this nice college neighborhood. And so, of course, growing up, I live in Calvert County, which is a predominantly white county. So, of course, I've had several racist experiences in regards to that. But that's just, I wanted to share that traffic stop so people can get an understanding that profiling is real. Like, I was literally profiled just from the appearance of my car. And I was doing nothing wrong. I had been out with friends, and I was literally driving back to college campus. But because of what they suspected or thought was suspicious, or because of what I was driving, they immediately assumed that, oh, something bad must be about to happen, or this person in this vehicle something must be associated with something in regards to in regards to that. So I wanted to share that. Shanelle, Marcus, did you want to share any of your experiences?
I'll go. So I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a lot, but I'm not gonna pick the one Shanelle probably thinks I'm gonna say, because I'm still a little on edge about that one. So I'm gonna leave that one alone. But so there was this time, it's 2020 now, and around 2014, 2015, I was working in Montgomery County. And I was a case manager for an intense crisis unit that worked with children in the community. And I had to go out to the families, and all my sessions had to be with the family in their home or their school, where they felt comfortable. A lot of the kids wanted to do it at their home because I could bring them some food, we could talk, we could vibe, we could keep it moving. So I actually got to one of my kids' houses a little early with some food. So I sat out front, I let the mom know, I let the dad know, and the kid was on the way home from school. And I usually sit in the car because, it just feels a little awkward. If I don't have to rush to go to work, I'm not going to rush. I'm going to just chill in the car. So this is in the area of Bethesda Chevy Chase. So I sat in the car. I think I was in there for about 10 minutes. And then next thing you know, the police had pulled up behind me. So I really wasn't, tripping. I knew where I was doing was fine. And again, at that point in time, I had a black car. It was tinted out. So you didn't really know who was inside. So the police came up to the door and they knocked on the door. I rolled the window down. Well, first off, I rolled all the windows down because that's what I was conditioned to do as a black man that nobody else had to do, was to roll all the windows down and put their hands on the ceiling. But that's another story. So I did that. And, the cop said, what did he said? How did he say? He said, is this your neck of the woods? And to me, I said, oh, because this is like the rich part. And because I don't look rich, because maybe because I'm in the Honda Accord at this point in time. Oh, because I don't look rich because I'm a black male with a beard. He was like, no, not like that. But this is, is this where you're supposed to be right now? And I said, yeah, it actually is. This is where I'm supposed to be. And then he asked me for my license and my registration. So of course I gave it to him. I'm not gonna argue with him. So I gave it to him. He didn't have me step out the car or anything. This is very, very overt, right? Didn't have me step out the car or anything. And then he looks at my license and he says, you have a Prince George's County residence. What are you doing up here? Why are you up here? And I was like, well, people work in different places than where they live, right? And he caught an attitude, and I was like, I'm just curious. Did you ask me where I work, who I work for? And so then he asked, and I tell him, and he's like, oh, I know that agency and this and this and that. And I was like, I don't care. Can I get my stuff back? Like, I'm waiting for my kid. But that one, I wanted to be specific with picking one that wasn't like a physical like argument or anything, but that little microaggression, right? That little, oh, this isn't your neck of the woods comment. That little, it just, well, you live in PG, so why are you in Montgomery County? Like, I can travel across county lines. That's not illegal, right? That's okay. And lo and behold, the reason he got the call anyway was because there was a white lady that was sitting outside on her porch that had said that there was a black man sitting in the car and it looked like he was casing the place. And to me, and granted, I may have looked like I was casing the place. I may not. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I wasn't. But, to me, it just reaffirmed and, made me re-eternalize that understanding that no matter what you do or how you do it, people are gonna look at you the way they want to look at you, and that's how that lady looked at me. And then again, that's how that law enforcement officer looked at me. And so it did, like, I didn't end bad. It was no, I didn't get a ticket or a citation, or it didn't turn to a big fledged argument like some other ones that I've been in have. But that little microaggression like sets the tone, and then next thing you know, I'm like, dang, maybe, you know, I might have to find a new job. Like, I'm not trying to have to drive up here and have to go through this every single time I got to come see this kid every week, you know. And then if I do go through it every time, I'm not my best self when I'm working with the kid, and and the kid's white, but I'm working with him, you know what I mean? It's just, it's like, it's crazy how like all those little underpinnings just happen, and then you just have to, again, as Black people, just suck it up, put on your good face, and, you know, go and do what you're supposed to be doing.
And it's unfortunate. I'm sorry, Shanelle. I wanted to.
No, you good.
Commented on it before, before you went on. But it's unfortunate that like you're literally out, you know, doing your job, and you can't even properly do your job because people make assumptions. Like this lady made an assumption about you being there, like you didn't have the right to be there. You're sitting in your car. You're not bothering her. You're not, you know, you're not out. Like if you were trying to case the place, I'm pretty sure you'd have been looking around, maybe even out of your car, walking around trying to see, you know, what it is that you could get into. You're sitting in your car. And so just because she had that assumption of prejudice that there's this Black man in this predominantly white neighborhood in this area, oh, of course he shouldn't be here. You know, let me call the police. Like instead of maybe just going and knocking on your window and saying, hey, sir, you know I've never seen you around here before. I just wanted to make sure, are you okay? Even though I'm sure you being okay wasn't her concern, but to segue into the conversation, you know, are you okay? Is your car broken down? Like, you know, to get some reasoning as to why you're there, instead of immediately jumping to the conclusion that, oh, this Black man is here, he's going to do something bad. But I'm pretty sure, and it's so terrible to say, but it's our reality. Had it been a white man sitting in the car, he could have truly been casing the place, and no, the police wouldn't have been called. And granted, had it been a Black neighborhood and this white guy was sitting out of there, I'm pretty sure nobody would have bothered him, because you have the right to truly just sit in your car and not bother anybody. When did that become against the law? But it's those types of prejudices and assumptions that people make, just because they generalize an entire group of people, instead of truly building a relationship with them and getting to know them for who they are. That's a whole nother conversation. Shanelle, go ahead.
Hold on, real quick, Shanelle. Hold on, real quick.
Man,
I gotta respond to her. Sorry, that was good.
No, that's good.
I was gonna say, you know, and it's crazy because people that, so I definitely, and I don't, this may just be me, but I think it's like actually a lot of Black men. We've been kind of like taught that like you have to walk with this intensity and this, you know, this kind of like face. So like when I walk with pride. I walk with like, you're gonna know who I am, and if you don't, then you'll find out, kind of thing. But I also, so it may seem sometimes like if I come off standoffish because I'm not speaking, but that's just how I look, right? But if you talk to anybody that knows me, once I start talking, you're like, oh, like this is passion. Like, you know, like some people tell me, my mom says it, and like some of my female friends, and my male friends don't say it, but some of my female friends is flat out, they're like, Marcus, you gotta smile more, bro. Like you don't even be mad, you just be chilling, but you gotta smile more. But I say that to say, like, if she did approach me, she would have, you know, she might have been like, oh, like, you know, he's doing a lot for the community, not even about me, but like, you're doing a lot for the community, and I appreciate what you're doing for the community. It has nothing to do with my skin color, but you're accepting, you know, hey, like, what exactly do you do? And then I can explain it. And granted, I don't have to if I don't want to, but if I do plan to, which I probably would have, explain what I do, and then you could have been like, okay, cool. And then next time you see that kid, you know, maybe having a conversation with the kid, like, hey, do you like him? How is he? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe you could use our services for your kid. But those levels of collaboration never can't even get touched because of your assumptions, presumptions, and racism.
Ooh, child. Yeah. Actually, as a follow-up to what y'all two said, I actually live kind of like in a suburban area. And I do not sit in my car very long because I am cognizant of the fact that there's only about 5 Black people in this apartment complex here in the mountains, and that the second that I stay in my car too long, that's the potential that someone may call and say, there's a Black woman out here casing the joint. Crazy, ain't it? I was trying to think if I was going to go with my most aggressive story or like a real, calmer one. So I'm going to just go with the calmer one because everybody else, played it safe. So we have offices in Pittsburgh, and clearly, this is like a Black owned, operated, organization. And I get like gratification knowing that somebody may not even know that I'm Black and they're a counselor. Like if they got me from insurance or whatever, it don't say that I'm a Black woman. It just says Shanelle Clay on it with the acronyms, and then they just come in. And so sometimes some people don't know that I'm a therapist. Well, our office is also, we've been blessed to have our office in the Google building, which is a primarily white building, right? There's a bunch of white people everywhere. And so sometimes when I walk in there and I'll have a head wrap on, I got some Black, power t-shirt on, whatever the case may be, because I don't switch my my identification for my clients. I don't, right? Because they're going to be seeing a Black woman. So they're going to be seeing all of the Black women, not parts of the Black woman. So I'm not doing any of that, right? And so there's a Starbucks across the street. And so I walked over the bridge, went to the Starbucks, and I'm waiting in the line. Now I go to the Starbucks sporadically, but I go there enough for at least one of the baristas to know who I am. I always order the same thing because I'm basic like that, and that's just what I order, right? I don't know too much about Starbucks menu. So I pre-order ahead, walk down to go get it, and it's cold outside. So this lady is like, she's looking at me, I'm looking at her, I give her a smile, whatever. So then the guy's like, oh, y'all staying here late again, because I sometimes use our building with my cohort members in my doc program to study. And I was like, yeah, we're probably going in here being late. And so she overheard and she was like, oh, are you in school? I said, oh, yeah, I am. And so she was like, oh, do you go to CCAC? CCAC is the community college that's here in Pittsburgh. So I said, no. So she said, oh, okay. Well, are you at the nursing school that's downtown? I said, no, I'm not at the nursing school. And she said, oh. I was like, yeah. I was like, no. Well, one, I asked her what nursing school, because I was like, I'm not from here. I'm from Maryland. She's like, oh, are you visiting? I said, no, I live here now because I'm in school. So she says, so she's looking around because, mind you, Pittsburgh has a lot of universities, and good portion of them are very prestigious universities. You got Carnegie Mellon, you got all these schools. So I tell her what school I go to. So she's like, oh, you're getting a bachelor's. Your family must be proud. So I said, they were when I got it back in 2009. They were. They definitely were. So she was like, well, you're in school for another bachelor's degree? I said, no, actually, I'm in grad school. So, well, that's just great. Well, what are you in grad school for? I said, oh, I was like, just human services. Because now I don't want to talk to you about anything realistically, right? So she says, oh, well, when you get your master's, it's going to explore such a different world. She was like, I'm trying to encourage my son to go back and get his master's. I said he should do it because it definitely explored a different world for me. So now she's looking at me real crazy because she doesn't know what I'm talking about now. She's like, wait a minute. I already accused you of having your associates, which there's nothing wrong with any of these layers of degrees. I just told you no. I just told you I already had a bachelor's since 2009. And you just asked me about my master's and I just told you no. So her brain is now boggled because she's trying to figure out, is this a certification program that's after, because she ain't dare going to open up her mouth and ask me, am I getting my PhD? There's no way. This Black girl with this Black t-shirt on, I had a Because I Can t-shirt on, so it got hella Black names on it. She's not going to ask no questions about that, and she's not going to ask, and I had a scarf on my head, so she's definitely not about to ask me why I'm in the Starbucks in East Liberty, which is a fairly gentrified neighborhood. It's kind of like the Columbia Heights, if you will, of Pittsburgh. You ain't going to ask me that because I'm on the Bakery Square side. She's not going to ask me that. So when the guy comes and brings me my cup, I decided, you know what? Let me explain to her something. So I was like, no. I was like, actually, I'm getting my PhD in counseling. I'm actually a therapist, and my office is across the street. In the Google building, it is. You have a good one. In that instance, I recognized that there was a microaggression that she had where she didn't think that I was going to have. Now, Black don't crack, and I kind of primarily look a little bit young to be a therapist and to have all the acronyms that I have and to be in this PhD program. But you clearly know that I don't look like a 19 or a 20-year-old. So for you to start reaching down to the lowest tier didn't even afford me for me to say bachelor's. If I would have said, oh no, it's my associates, then you could have carried on. But you were so uncomfortable about giving me my acolytes, my acknowledging my strengths, that you recognize that, oh crap, I done messed up. So even after I grabbed my drink and was about to head back over, oh that's so good, oh my God, that's so good. I already know it's good. I already know it's good because that's what I signed up for. There's no course for argument. There's no course for there's no reason for me to say, well, why you expect that? Because unfortunately, there's an underlying layer of expectancy, right? And so for Black people, we are tired primarily for the situation because we've coded ourselves in a format called armoring, right? We've done two different things for defense mechanisms that were not working initially, which is one, armoring, and two, conformity. Armoring is saying that, okay, I know that someone is going to accuse me of having a lower level education because of my skin color. I know that someone is going to have these ideologies about me because of my skin color or my intersectionality. So we armor ourselves for the response, and when it happens, we have a minimal reaction. So sometimes it's normally numbed, other times it's normally we displace it and we carry it somewhere else and we project on somebody else. Then the secondary response is conformity, which is, okay, I'm gonna conform. Either I'm gonna give this lady what she's saying, where she says, okay, yeah, I'm in school, and don't correct her because I don't want to stir her or make her nervous or make her scared, because that's a response for us. Or I'm just going to abide by the law of the land and completely change my intersectionality, completely change how I present myself because I need to conform. That is sometimes how it goes. So in hindsight, microaggressions are going to continuously happen. That's my aspect or my story on racism. It's comical now because I've passed that, but for the day, I definitely was annoyed, right? So yeah, so that's pretty much my story.
Hey, so Shanelle, Andrea, you can cut me off anytime you want. I'm sorry, I just like to
go right ahead.
Okay. So I was thinking, right? So there's been times where, so I think my close circle knows I'm in school and they know I'm in a doctoral program, right? And I think people are knowing now because of, my business, and which is cool. But there have been times where I've realized that it's very, like, I have to really kind of grapple with either do I want to conform or do I want to press you out? And most people know me know I'm the press out. So like I just press people out like flat out, like I'll be in like a doctoral, literally like a doctoral get together or something at school, and it's like people will look at me a certain way, and it's and I'm like, oh, are you looking at me because I'm in a doctoral program and I got tattoos and a beard and I'm bald and I'm Black and I'm a decent size, or you thought I was just like gonna be up here doing something different? You thought maybe I would just come to drop something off and leave? And I love all of my cohort members, but there are also cohorts that I've met, and they had no clue. They were like, oh, like, so, are you here for it? I'm like, the same reason you're here, where it's class at 1:00 and y'all just had a class that ended. Like, why would I not, you know what I mean? And it's crazy. And now I look at it, like, at first I was like, it kind of bothers me when I first got into the program because I thought it was annoying. But now I look at it and I'm like, yeah, like, bring me the smoke. Like, yes, that's me. I'm here. It's not going to change. You know what I mean? And what I try to do, and this helps me push, but also helps me realize that this is how I like to give back. I tell my students, my mentees, the kids I work with all the time, like, they're like, oh, Miss Mason, you in school, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm in school, man. I'm in school. They're like, oh, like, you doing like your bachelor's? I'm like, nah, bro, like I got that. That's on the wall. Like, look at it, take a look. They're like, oh, that's cool. They're like, so what you in school for now? I'm like, oh, my master's. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Nah, I'm playing. That's on the wall. It's on the wall. They're like, what you really in school for? I'm like, I'm trying to get my doctorate. And they're like, they kind of get stuck, and not like a look up to you stuck, but like a, I can do that too because Mr. Mason's doing it. Mr. Mason looks like me. Mr. Mason has a beard like me. Mr. Mason has tattoos like me. Mr. Mason can have, a regular conversation and not throw any big words at me and try to confuse me on purpose, so that way I feel like I'm stupid. But then Mr. Mason can also have that clinical conversation with, the appropriate parents or individuals if he has to have that conversation. And they don't, like, when they see that kind of like that jump in and out, that's when they kind of like, oh, like, all right, cool, like, he's a Black man, I can do it because I'm seeing him do it. I know for me that's like my push. I just want to say that. I don't know if that's your push, but I know for me that's definitely something that kind of keeps me going.
No, my push as a clinician, I mean, although this podcast is formatted primarily to talk about, racial stress or racial battle fatigue, which is the clinical terminology, I get a rush when someone is incorrect about who I am based off of their assumption for my intersectionality. I love the fact that I can come somewhere and sit down and people are like, what the heck are you doing here? And then when I start running off acolytes and start running off my background, that you get stuck. I love that. I get a rush out of it. I love the fact that I literally could have a talk with some of like my own professors and educate them. I remember one time I was talking to a professor and I was like, yeah, because of racial battle fatigue. They was like, what is that? I was like, okay, like my research is telling me about XYZ, and I see them jotting it down on the sheet of paper. I like that, because the assumption was that Black folks couldn't teach white folks how to do nothing at some point. And the fact that I'm able to provide that level of education to people is magnificent. And it does one for me. I know that much. And I like being in spaces, especially white spaces, at this point in my career, where I am one of few, because that means that that's just one space for me right now. But I guarantee I'm gonna create about 3 or 4 of them before I leave. Why not? It's the reason why Onyx has been afloat for a while, right? Which is where, you come in and you have 12 clinicians and 96% of them, 97% of them are Black. So I agree. There has to be a level of strength or power. The way that suppression or oppression, has been a thing is also because there's emotional component that attaches itself, that makes us feel like we aren't able to get out of it, or we need to just lie down in it. And so your response of like, I'm proud that like I'm the Black man that they have as a form of representation, you cancel out all of those stereotypes, those negative stereotypes that they have been given or provided as to what a Black man actually looks like. Most Black men that have their ED or their PhD, that they probably have been in some form of meeting wise with, have normally probably been principals, which means that it's an authoritarian figure, which also means that they're going to be in trouble, which then also creates what? This schema that if you are high, then that means that you are the person who is authoritarian, which tells people what to do. And whether they associate you as a Black man who has his higher level of education as someone who is an ally, or that they can confide in, or someone who they should fear, whether it's healthy fear, right? In a sense, because they don't necessarily know. Those are all factors that you have to consider when you become somebody else's mentor, or you become a symbol. And so granted, Floyd didn't, I'm pretty sure him being a symbol right now is probably not the way that he foreseen his life, but I guarantee him trying to put his mark as a Black man was probably what he tried to do his whole entire life. And the second that he was killed and everybody's response was so grandiose, I'm pretty sure nobody's going to forget this man's name. Hands down. They may not have known it 2 years ago. Nobody maybe paid attention to it in his neighborhood 5 years ago, but no one is going to forget this man's name. It is going to be on the tongues and the mouths of racists, of whoever, for years.
And before we move on to the next question, I wanted to just kind of piggyback off of what both of y'all said. I think I really like that's what I really appreciate about us, like the beauty of us, the fact that we can just be so multifaceted and be able to push past the assumptions of people and how they see us and how they view us, and be like, nah, I can be Black, I can be relatable, I can be educated, I can be all of these things. So don't just kind of confine me and put me into this box because this is how you expect me to look. And I love it about us as a people. And a lot of my because I have a lot of different friends. So a lot of my white friends actually have been reaching out to me this weekend. Well, not this weekend, but mainly last week, within the last week or so, after it happened, just kind of wanting to figure out what more that they can do because they don't want to be silent, they don't want to be complacent, but they just really don't know how to help. And so I was giving them tidbits and offering, my input on my suggestions on how they can get involved and how they can educate themselves. Because I was letting one of my friends know that a lot of it is sparked by ignorance and lack of education from the white community. Is like they don't know us as a community, and a lot of people are choosing not to get to know us. I know Pastor Mike Ty yesterday, I was listening to his sermon on racial reconciliation, and he made a very good point. He was talking about people in general just need to take risk, and he talked about the acronym was relationship, being intentional, the S was, I think it was sharing and speaking up, and then the K was knowledge. And so making sure before you form opinions about people, actually start to build relationship with them. So if you have Black friends and they have a cookout and you're the only white person there, go experience their culture, be able to relate to people and be intentional about it before you make assumptions about a whole race of people based on stereotypes and generalizations. And when people that are making racist remarks, speak up about it. Don't just sit there, be complacent, and not say anything. Share knowledge that educate yourself on our plights and how we've been mistreated for so long. I share with her, I found it online. It was like a article that somebody had written, like there was like 75 ways that white people can help the Black community. And I went through before I shared with her, and I read each point because I didn't want to just misguidingly share. And I read it, and the person who wrote it actually had a lot of valid points. And so I shared it with her, and she was giving them different books that they can read to educate themselves on Black people, giving them different causes that they can be a part of, telling them to write to legislation for police reform, all of these different calls to action that they can do, not only them, but that we can do as well to make changes within this nation and within this world. I know a book that I love, The New Jim Crow. I recommended that to her, and I was telling her that, if you have a chance, it's a long book, but, sit down and read it. You can learn about mass incarceration and color blindness and, how all of this stuff has been put in place just to educate yourself. Because if you're not educated on things, you go into situations blindly. And a lot of people are just ignorant and they're uneducated about our community. And so I told her, I feel like education is a big step. Just continue to educate yourself and speak up on it and speak out about it. So how do you, I was going to do this Martin Luther King snippet, but I don't feel like it's necessary right now. So I want you guys to share your advice. Like, what would you say to people who just want to get involved but really don't know how? What would you suggest that they do?
You want me to go? Oh, all right. So allyship is the terminology of someone being an ally, right? And to be an ally, you have to acknowledge what the issue is, right? Not just for you, but to acknowledge what the issue is for the oppressed, right? So your issue as a non-Black person may be, oh, my friends were treated bad, but go a little bit more in depth with that, right? And educate yourself. I think you mentioned like some books. Some of the books that they have mentioned over the last couple of weeks is White Fragility. It's by Robin DiAngelo, and then there's How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibrahim Kendi. And then the third one is I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made Full of Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. Those three books are very, important and just like a starter package of just trying to understand the concept. Two, I would definitely say, like, don't try to conform. Like, I don't need you out here, trying to use certain language and terminology, because if that's not your passion, like the level of ingenuineness will end up seeping through, and it won't be, your attempt won't be valid, right? So we're not asking that. There was a post, actually we have it on the Onyx IG page, is Onyx_therapy_group. And so it was a post by someone called E Happy Danny, and it says, reading the signals, so being an ally during race conversations. The first thing that they mention is that for you to listen. So when a person of color is sharing their experience, what you're doing is you're maintaining silence. We do this for communication, especially when it comes to like relationships and things like that, which is that you're listening attentively, you're being silent. You may do encouraging murmurs, which is like a okay, if you need to. Two, you amplify, so the messages of the person of color, or the thoughts and the ideas that they had, they're in their own voice, meaning that it's not up for your perception, it is from the voice of the person. So at this point, you would be kind of affirming them, right? Which is that even if you don't 100% agree with the dialogue, you'll say something like, okay, I can understand where you're coming from. So being very empathetic, right? Versus being sympathetic. And then third, which is speak, right? So when you witness an injustice or an opportunity for you to stand up about something, this is when you speak up, right? So if you notice that someone has been offended, you may say, hey, the way that you kind of address so-and-so probably wasn't the best idea, or hey, like, I believe that you offended so-and-so because I was offended, right? So even kind of putting yourself in that placement. So you can definitely be an ally, and be available to be an ally, but you realistically have to have the notion or have the emotional capacity, if you will, to do allyship in a proper way, where you are not offending the person of color, but you're more so being a aid for the person of color. Marcus, you got something?
You summed you summed it up to a T. I'll give you that, Shanelle. So for me, I grapple with support from anybody that doesn't look like me. It used to be way, way worse, and that's something I had to acknowledge and process through. I remember I used to have conversations, and I would tell people, like, I honestly, probably like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, like, I don't need any white person's help. Like, I don't, like, at the end of the day, there's an ulterior motive, or there's something deeper at stake for me, or I'm gonna, you know what I mean, that's gonna be thrown in my face. And that's something I had to kind of like process through and really work to understand and work through. And I did. So I'm appreciative for that growth and from the people that kind of like challenged me in that sense. But I will say, Chanel, I really liked all of your options. For me, the last option that I would add to that, I wouldn't even take anything out. I would add all those in because I think that they're important, especially the conformity part, because that can come off very disrespectful if you do it, the wrong way. But when it comes to support, I would expect. There's only one thing that I've seen so far that I was like, that's something. If I were in that space, that's what I would want. And there was a protest. I think it seemed like it was in a court, but maybe it wasn't. Or in a classroom, and there was a black gentleman that was kind of like saying what he needed to say, and there were police there, and he was standing on the table, and it sounded like he was just like talking about like Black lives, and there were 4 white people that just surrounded him, and they didn't say anything, they didn't add anything, they didn't try and take the spotlight out of it, but they just surrounded him in a circle while he was on top of the table. And the reason they did that was because the police were trying to get to him, to get him down, for him to, I guess, for them to subdue him or do whatever it was they were going to do. But they knew they knew that the police weren't going to go through them to get him. So the police literally just kind of had to stand there. And then I think one officer ended up trying to like pull him down. And then again, the white group of the 4 people, they kind of got in a line. And as soon as they did that, the cop stopped. And the black guy could continue to say what he needed to say to the crowd. So like that sense of allyship for me is action. Like I want to see that you support, and I want it to be action oriented. Like, yes, you can read a book and that's great. Yes, you can learn and you can break down your own mental thoughts and processes and begin to grow and kind of educate yourself more. But then you have to do it and put it into action. And I feel like that was the most action that again, if I were in that circumstance, I would have really appreciated. You're not arguing, you're not yelling, you're not saying anything. You're literally just a barrier because you know that the space that you have, they're not going to treat you the same way they treat us. So you've created that barrier for us to be able to provide the conversation or what the rhetoric or the speech or the conversation to the masses. Like, so like that was literally in my very young 30 years of life on this planet, that is the first time that I saw a group of white people do something like that in my eyes. And that was the only thing that I would appreciate if I were in that circumstance. And it was just so powerful to know, for them to acknowledge that I've been given and I've been afforded some sense, and I've been afforded some luxuries that this group of people don't have. And I'm at the point where I'm not okay with what and how they're treated. So I'm just going to step in the way. And that way I know that they can get out what they need to get out. And again, the black guy never ended up getting arrested. The white people never ended up getting hurt or arrested, but they just knew that if they were in the space in between law enforcement and us, that automatically was the barrier. And that was the barrier that young man at that time, he needed. So for me, it's just action. But again, action looks different for different people. So also be mindful and be aware what you're capable and what you are willing to do. You don't want to get out there and do something and then you realize that you can't handle it, because then it comes back to, well, you shouldn't have been in there anyway. This is a whole nother, ball game of issues and conversations. But if you want to really support anybody that you know is black, or anybody that you know is a minority or going through any kind of issues, support them through understanding, processing, educating, and then action. We love to be stuck, and I say we as a country. I'm not gonna say we as black people. We as a country love to be stuck with having to re-educate some people that know already and don't want to acknowledge it, and then we love to be stuck at processing it. And then we get really cloudy when it comes to action, because our action looks different than other people's action. And, white people's action might look different than black people's action. And at times, to be honest, sometimes we need a Karen I saw this sign that said Karen's against racism. And it was like, I need to talk to the leader or the manager of the racist conversation. Like things like that, as funny or not funny as it is, that's some things that we need when it comes to allyship. So just being mindful and being aware of that.
That's good. So what I took away from that was their ability to be able to first acknowledge and then ally. And if you're going to ally with us, make sure that you're going to stand with it. So that's what I took from that. Thank y'all. We are almost done. I only have 2 questions, and they're really short questions. The next one actually is one of my friends asked, and he just wanted to know our opinions on what we think, if anything, it'll take for America to kind of reach a level of peace and equality for all. So I'll let y'all answer that because I gave him my answer in my exhaustion. And I was like, I don't want to keep reiterating it and repeating myself. So I know y'all have some lovely words. So take it away.
So can you just say it one more time, Andre? I want to make sure I say the right thing before I say this out loud.
So the question was, what do you think, if anything, will it take for America to reach a level of peace and equality for all?
The only way America will reach peace and equality for all is a complete teardown of what we know as the judicial, legal, and educational system and a complete revamp of that system with totally new legislation that is put into place for action, not just because it looks good on paper, and people that are going to hold, leaders that will hold everybody else accountable to their actions, I think is the only way.
Go ahead, Shanelle.
Yeah, so I basically think pretty much the same thing. You know, a lot of the decisions that are made are kind of outside of our scope on a day-to-day basis, right? And so we rely on on different systems, right, if you will. And so there definitely needs to be a complete revamp that makes people that holds everyone accountable, not just the people who you feel on a social economic status are beneath you in a sense. It needs to be for everyone, right? But even up to the highest tier. And so we need to kind of make that as a message that goes for everybody versus just one or two people. So yeah.
My bad, I thought it was unmuted. I agree with both of you. I have nothing else to add or share on that. So this is the last question, and this is a question from a mental health standpoint. So we all know that the events from the last week have just been traumatic, and everybody has been openly admitting that they're just not okay. And so as a therapist, what ways would you recommend we take care of our mental health when dealing with traumatic events of this nature?
Okay. All right. So I would definitely say, Marcus, talking about you. So there's a couple of things that I would say in taking care of yourself. The first thing is you are going to need to debrief from social media and the media. I'm sorry. There is no way. We have already watched videos on top of videos of people being murdered, right? And there's a level of trauma that happens. Like if we want to talk about the trauma response to the brain, we can. If we want to talk about the emotional connection that we have, we can, right? Like it doesn't matter what ethnic background, which race, and by the way, race is a social construct, but I'm not even going to go on my tangent about that, which is we need to be very careful about what we feed ourselves. When we think about it in like a spiritual context, like if you go to church, then you hear all the time, which is be careful what you feed your spirit. The same thing applies. Be careful what energy that you pour into and what you feed your spirit. There may be a time for a person to take a break from social media and from the television, cut off your CNN and news alerts, because you know those things ding every hour on the hour. Stop looking at social media, put your focus on something else, right? That could be for maintenance, not innovation, because we are still in COVID, right? Two, as far as your mental, right, process, whether it's through journaling or vocal response, right? So if you want to say, I think you use a lot of I feel sentences in the beginning, Andrea, where you were talking about how you have felt emotional connection to Mr. Floyd based off of your brother also having the same occupation. So you are allowed to identify the comparisons, the fear, the anguish, the anxiety, all of those things, right? Acknowledging them vocally or through journaling is very efficient. 3, action-oriented responses, right? So like, what can I potentially do and what things are outside of my control? A lot of the times we as people get very anxious because we think that we need to take on 100% of the issue, right? And so what I'm finding a lot about people that I speak to, which is like, okay, I need to just be able to do something. I need to do something now, very impulsively. And they're taking on a very serious emotional response to it, which is it's okay and it's not okay at the same time. It's not okay for the incident, but it's okay to be connected, right, to people. And so we have to be very cognizant of what we can actually control versus what we cannot. 4 is to be open to dialogue wherever you are, but make sure that you maintain a boundary of how much dialogue that you're allowed to have. 5, make sure that you are not practicing conformity regarding your own feelings and emotions. A lot of the time people are conforming right now to make our non-minority, our non-people of color comfortable in this season, right? And what is happening is that level of conformity does not allow us to process candidly, and that buildup messes with our emotions, messes with our mood. So let's not practice conformity in this season. And then the last thing that I would definitely say is that limit how much you feel like you need to educate yourself. I listed a couple of books in this podcast, and I've handed those books out to people, not physically, but the names of the books, because I also feel like impeding my own emotional response to this situation, and the situations that have followed, because he's not the first, right? The Breonna situation, as they putting it in the news, the Mr. Floyd situation, the Mr. Berry situation, like we're situationed out, we're issued out, right? So I don't feel like I need to educate you on something that you have the privilege and the ability to educate yourself on. So also minimize the amount of time and energy that you're using to educate others based off of something that they could equally get the responses to. Marcus, you got anything else?
I don't. Well, I do. I do want to piggyback your first one. That social media piece. Like I tell friends, associates, coworkers, colleagues, cohort members all the time, like you have to be aware and mindful of your social media diet. Like it's just like the same thing you put in your body. So you want to look after, you want to make sure you eat right, or you want to do this the right way. It's the same way with your mind. You have to be able to check out, because if you don't, like you can get stuck in that rabbit hole and you don't even realize, kind of how Shanelle said, like that trauma that you're putting on yourself, it will mess you up, and it will do it slowly but surely in the long run. So that's a big thing I know I've been telling everybody, and I for myself, like this is one of those things, you practice what you preach. I know I still to this day have not watched a video, but it's because I know I don't need to watch it. Like it is what it is. I've accepted it, and not watching it or watching it wouldn't make a difference at this point, because the action happened, the behaviors happened. I know what happened. So we have like this knack where like we want to like really look at and like see like that gruesome like stuff, but it also plays on your psyche, and it plays on how you feel about certain things, and it plays on how you go out throughout the rest of your day. So just be aware of that. I haven't been on social media in that span of time, honestly, for about a week now. I just kind of hop on, post something, and hop right back off. So that's one, definitely a social media diet. I would definitely do check-ins with whoever you feel comfortable with. That could be a group of people. It could be one or two, or it could be a therapist. It could be a parent, whoever you feel comfortable with. I know I check in. I have like ongoing check-ins due to COVID, and also now because of what's been going on. I have a group of friends I check in with weekly, and it's 4 of us, and we don't talk about anything specific, but we just talk. Like we just FaceTime and just have conversations and check on each other and see how we're all doing. Because a lot of times people don't realize it, especially with COVID, a lot of people aren't okay, but they're putting on this mask that they are okay, because that's what society is kind of like pushing, that it's not that deep and it's serious, but it's going to be okay no matter what kind of thing. So just be aware of that and kind of check on those people that or if you just need to check in for yourself, that's okay. I call my mom, get my mom the nurse. I really don't need anything. I just want to talk to somebody that's older than me that cares, and it makes me feel good. So those two things. And then I also would sign up for the Onyx group. Therapy. Their services are amazing via Shanelle and other clinicians in the practice. And I also would like to say sign up and look at Minds in Motion Therapy on Instagram. That's my business, and it offers both businesses offer a lot of information via social media that's supportive, and it kind of changes their rhetoric in regards to what you're looking at and a lot of the negativity that's going on. But also reach out if you're looking for a clinician. And I will also say, in my personal opinion, I think we clinicians believe in cultural competency, but I tell people all the time, I think you should go to somebody that looks like you. That's just what it is. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but I think you should, if you're looking for therapy and you want to talk to somebody, talk to someone that looks like you. You can go on Psychology Today. You can go on Henry Health. You can go on the Onyx Group. You can go on Minds in Motion. There are a lot of places where you can find Black therapists or Black clinicians that just want to support you all through this. So definitely give it a thought.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you both so much for just taking the time to just talk to me today and to dialogue. Shanelle, offline, we're going to talk another day about race and how it's a social construct, because I had this conversation yesterday. Because we always be here. We be thinking the same.
I know.
So we'll talk about that offline. So I want to thank you all so both. I truly appreciate you for taking the time out of your schedule. And for everybody listening, I just want to challenge you this week to just kind of pray differently in spite of all that's going on. Pray for somebody that you don't know this week. Pray for somebody who doesn't look like you this week, even though it may be difficult. Pray for someone who can't relate to you and doesn't understand your culture. Pray for an enemy. Just try to show a little love and compassion even in the midst of your pain. The world just truly needs you to be the change that you need. So until next time, gems, continue to shine bright and enjoy the rest of the week.